Okay, today we're going to work on the basics of the nervous system. What we're going to talk about is pretty much the parts, where things are, and some of what they do. We're not going to worry so much about how they do it yet. That's for another day. Okay? So the first thing that we've got to talk about is our nervous system tends to be a lot more parts than what we're used to. Most of us, when asked the question, come up with what two major parts that are part of your nervous system?
The brain.
Your brain and your spinal cord. Okay, we got to be careful with the word spine versus spinal cord. Your spine means the bones that hold everything in place. Your spinal cord is the nerve tissue that runs down in the middle of it, okay? So we got to be really careful with that. Now, what I told you is we're going to start off with one system. Remember I said that we're going to work with 1, 2, 3, 4 as we divide things down, okay? So first we have one nervous system. It all coordinates together, and basically it's got segments of it that are designed to control things as we send it out to our body, okay? And things as it's coming in from our body. Because remember, as our nervous system, we're taking input from the world. This is all about how we see, hear, touch, taste, smell, all that input coming into us from outside. And then our responses to it are controlled by our nervous system. So that stuff has to come in and go out. We have a series of sensory nerves, one of your vocab words, where things are coming in, and then motor nerves that control what's going out to the rest of our body. Okay? Now, our nervous system, though, has two segments, and they're not just your brain and spinal cord. Okay? We refer to the two different parts of the nervous system as the central nervous system, which is the brain and spinal cord, and then the peripheral nervous system, which is, do we know what the word peripheral means?
Like no, not in the middle, like on the outside.
Yeah, it's the things around the edges. It's everything else other than the central part, okay? So these peripheral nervous system are the nerves that reach out into your body and either send information out to your body or bring it back to the spinal cord or the brain, okay? So the processing part is your central nervous system, brain and spinal cord. The peripheral nervous system is what brings the information in and sends it back out, okay? So that's our two parts to the nervous system. Central, peripheral. Okay? Now, when we go to looking, though, at our central nervous system, because this is where the big stuff happens that we all think about. This is where the brain and spinal cord, this is where we do our thinking, this is where we get our coordination, our reflexes, all of that stuff ties together. So we're going to start breaking down parts of the central nervous system for a minute. Now, what we've got here, though, I want to make sure that you understand something before we move on past this picture. We're showing our central nervous system and the peripheral nerves. Now those peripheral nerves in this picture stop. In our body, they don't. They're like our blood vessels, and they continue to branch out into every little bit of us. It has to go out to every little nerve fiber, every little muscle fiber, all sorts of tissues, all of our sensory nerves. These branch out just like our blood vessels branch out to touch everything. Okay? So don't be fooled by this. These nerves do not end where this picture shows. They just get smaller and branch out further. Okay? All right, let's go take a look at our brain now. The biggest part of our central nervous system is our brain. Now our brain comes into, remember, 1, 2, and 3. Here's where we get 3. Your brain comes in 3 big regions. These are your first 3 vocab words, okay? The first one is your cerebrum. That's all the colored portions here, the red, the blue, the purple, the green, okay? It's the huge portion of your brain that's up here as the top part of your skull, okay? This is called your cerebrum. This is where all the complicated things that make us human happen. This is where the thinking, the coordination, the feelings, the bringing in of information and understanding of information, all that happens in your cerebrum, okay? This is the part where we would be thinking things. This is where coordination and learning come in, okay? Lots of different things happen up here. In humans, this is a bigger portion of our brain than it is in most other animals. There are a lot of other animals that have a cerebrum. Just, it's a small portion of their brain. Where in ours, it's the biggest part. This is what makes us, us. Okay? This is the big deal, the big difference between us and other animals. There are a few others out there that we think are very intelligent. Why? Because the size of their cerebrum compared to the size of the rest of their brain and the rest of their body shows us that they have the capacity to do a lot with that brain. Where we get the idea of dolphins being very smart is from this kind of a comparison. Yeah, not the football team, man. Sorry.
Yeah.
After that beating the Bears took, I can't say nice things about dolphins right now. Yeah. All right. Now, we said there were 3 parts. So we got our cerebrum, Our second part is back here, this base of our skull called the cerebellum. Okay? Now the cerebellum is a much more basic part of our body. It does a lot of very complicated things. Don't get me wrong that this is like some simple thing here. This is actually one of the most complicated, neatest parts of your brain that you have. Okay? This is what controls your balance, your coordination. This is the part of your brain that's doing the learning when you're a young child learning to walk. This is the part of your brain that is when you're an athlete trying to learn a new skill. When you're trying to train your body to be able to do something and coordinate it. This is where your coordination and balance and things come in. This is the part of your brain that has to function very, very quickly to be able to do all those fine little things. Because you don't think about, hey, okay, if I want to reach my arm out, you don't think about all the muscles that you have to do. You think about move your arm. That idea comes up here. The cerebellum is what gets that done. It knows, okay, if we want to move our arm, then I need to pull this muscle, and this muscle in this order and do these things. It's the part that does all that without you having to think about it. You give the command up here, the cerebellum gets it done. Okay? This is the business part of controlling your body. Okay? Now, the last part of this is down here. It's labeled in this picture as brainstem. Its more formal name is the medulla oblongata. That's your third part of your brain. That's your third vocab word. Medulla oblongata is your brainstem. Okay? It's the part of your brain that is now connecting down to your spinal cord and heading out into the rest of your body. Okay? This is the most basic part of your brain. Okay? As the brain goes up, its job gets more complicated. Okay? At the bottom, down here in the medulla, which is what we usually refer to the medulla oblongata, that's a long word. A lot of times we'll just call it the medulla. Okay? The medulla's job, keep the lights on. It's got all those basics of, hey, breathe. Hey, make the heart beat. Hey, make the basic organs run. Keep us alive. There's not a whole lot of thinking, not a whole lot of responding. This is just the, okay, we're in charge, keep the lights on, keep us alive. That's what goes on here, okay? So, in the brainstem, the medulla, we get the basics. We get, keep the lights on, keep the heart beating, keep the lungs breathing. As we move up to the cerebellum, we get coordination and movement and the ability to do the basics of survival. As we get up here, we get the more complicated things, and buried deep down inside, and you can't see in this picture, is where we get a lot of the things that control parts of our emotions, parts of our growth, and all those other things that the brain controls are buried deep inside, in the middle of all this. Okay? So your three major parts, cerebrum, cerebellum, medulla. Alright? So I promised three major parts. Here's the part with four now. Your cerebrum is so complicated that we break it into four different regions. Okay? They're the different colors here. They have four different names because they do different jobs. Now in everybody, these folds in the brain aren't exactly completely alike from individual to individual. They're pretty close. But there are certain folds that we notice that they're the same in everybody. There's a fold that goes right down here. There's a fold that goes across here, and there's another one back here. Divides the brain, the cerebrum, into four parts. We have the frontal lobe out here, which is in front. That's not really complicated. You see, this is how this brain would be oriented. It's the same as I'm facing here. So, frontal lobe. Okay? Now, farther back, but still up on top, is what's called the parietal lobe. Okay? It's up on top, but farther back than the frontal. It's called parietal. A lot of different things go on there than in the frontal lobe. Then you get clear to the back. This one's kind of weird because of what's wired up here. This is called the occipital lobe of the brain. It's clear in the back. Okay? It's actually where your eyes are wired up. And how weird is that? Eyes on the front, but the brain part that runs them is in the back. A little bit odd. Okay? But it makes sense once you see where those nerves come back to. Okay? And then you get this part on the side. The lower parts that's inside your ears area is called your temporal lobe. It's right in here, basically right above your ears and in. Okay? So we got four different parts. Frontal, parietal, occipital, temporal. Okay? Now, let's talk about what happens as this stuff goes out to the body. Okay? Our next thing is to get what those different regions do. Now, I'm not going to go through everything in these. You'll get these pictures sent to you, okay? But each of these regions has something different that it does. Occipital, we talked about it being vision. Well, the things that happen up here in the frontal lobe, this is where a lot of your thinking, your reasoning, your figuring things out kind of stuff goes. This is your higher level
Jacob
thinking.
Purcell, please come to the main office. Jacob Purcell, thank you.
Okay? A lot of those sorts of things, your reasoning, your emotional control comes from here. Okay? As you move back to the parietal, this is a lot of your senses. This is about sensing what's coming in from your body a little bit. This is where you get your left and right. This is where you get your body's orientation and information about how it's reaching out into the world. Okay? And then you get to your temporal lobe here, shown in blue on this one, is where a lot of your understanding of language, where some of your memory and things about hearing and speech are all wired up in here. Which kind of makes sense because it's down here near your jaw and near all those things, and it's also right inside your ear. So it's a very short distance for the nerve, remember that vocab word, vestibulocochlear nerve, wires up right into here. Okay? So we've got all those, and then we get the cerebellum, where we talk about balance, coordination, fine muscle control. This is where your brain has learned all the little details. You tell it to do something, it figures it out in the cerebellum, how to get it done. And then you get the brainstem or the medulla. This is where breathing, body temperature, digestion, all the basics of keeping us alive are there. Now, what we need to talk about next is how we get information in and out of the brain. Okay? One of the first things, notice that all this information, where are we getting most of the information from the outside world? Right up here in your head, right? Because your eyeballs are here, your nose is here, your tongue's here, your ears are here. Most of your senses are wired up here. There's a reason for that. Because they're all directly wired to your brain. Okay? They are they're attached by what's called cranial nerves, because they're inside your cranium, inside your skull. They're wired straight to your brain. They don't have to go through your spinal cord to get there. Okay? They're wired straight up here. Let's take a look. Now what this picture is it's kind of showing the bottom of the brain. As if you were taking this Burger King's brain here with half of it. Okay? If you were to tilt it back and you were looking up his spine, at the bottom of his brain you would get this. Okay? See how those kind of go together? This is his spinal cord coming down here. And what this is showing is where some of those cranial nerves attach to the brain. They actually wire straight in. Like our olfactory nerve is right up here, clear up at the very front. This part of your brain sits right above, just behind the bridge of your nose. It's sitting right on there. So, guess what? The part that does your smeller is attached to the brain right up front, right on the bottom. It's a real short trip, which kind of accounts for part of the reason why smells are such a big thing for us in our memory. It's because they're hardwired right there. Nerve number 1, right up front. Okay? Now, number 2, though, starts with your eyes. Your eyes are wired straight into your brain. Okay? From the optic nerve. Then, we have a series of nerves listed here. You'd be amazed at how complicated your eyes are. Think about all the movements you can make with your eyes and how tiny they are and how controlled they are. You can send them around in circles, up, down, all around. You can send them anywhere to look, right? And they stay coordinated together even, most of the time. Okay? This is actually such a complicated thing that there are 3 whole cranial nerves, 3 spots that control the muscles, just the muscles to aim your eyeballs. There are 3 sets of muscles controlled there that are all wired straight to your brain because that's such an important function to us. Then we get others that wire up the things about feeling and touching our skull and our face. There are others that control just our mouth, our tongue, our jaw, the things that we need to be able to speak, have their own straight wired straight to the brain. Okay? There's our other friend, our vestibulocochlear nerve again, wires straight in from our ears. Okay? We get others that control all of the muscles in our face. Think about how many muscles have got to be there for all the different faces you can make and all the different things that you can do and the expressions that you give. Okay? All of those things, because that's such an important thing to who we are wired straight from our brain. They don't have to go through any extra relays. They're hardwired right in. Okay? And then the really important one. This one back here. It wires in at the very top of your brain stem. It's called the vagus nerve. Okay? Now it is not spelled like Las Vegas. It's V-A-G-U-S. Okay? Your vagus nerve is the one that sends the constant signal out to beat the heart, breathe with the lungs, and to run your digestive organs. This is the one that sends out those signals that keep us alive. Okay? That's the big deal on here. The rest of it controls everything inside your head. This one goes out to the body. It's the one of just a couple that actually leave the skull, that are wired straight to the brain. Okay? And now, as we go down, though, we got to be able to control the rest of us from here down, right? Because these 12 nerves will control everything from here up. But as we go out, we got to take a look at some of the rest of these nerves. Now, we all kind of know how this thing works, right? We've got a spinal cord, and then out between those pieces of the spine shoot nerves off of our spinal cord. Now, those nerves go out and they wrap around certain parts of our body and wire them up. Okay? So each of these nerves that come out of the spine, they're called spinal nerves, actually wire up to different things inside our body. And what this diagram shows is some of the different organs that are controlled and where they're attached into our nervous system. They're plugged in like cables on a computer. Okay? They plug in at different ports along your spine. Okay? Now, this explains a lot about spinal injuries. Because if you cut the cord, everything below there isn't going to get a signal to your brain. It's no longer going to work. And the muscles that come off of these go right along with the organs. This shows where the organs are, but the muscles, anything that's below where the cut is and where those muscles are plugged into your spine, any damage, wherever that damage is in your body, everything below there will have a hard time functioning depending on the extent of the damage. If it's a complete cut of the cord, no signals are coming in or going back. This is the normal thing that we think of when we think of spinal injuries and being paralyzed or not being able to feel something. Okay? That's what goes on from these. All right, we're going to go ahead and ask some questions and go through some things. If you go ahead and stop the video. All right, can we get that stopped? Nope. All right, now you're going to have a really funky thing on the end of your video here because we didn't get it stopped.
You have to press it.
Okay, we got to close that.